One of the central ideas that Kant introduces in his critique of practical reason, not pure reason, is that we are an end in ourselves. We don't belong to the world of means. Now this is quite a profound thing. It will change your whole perception of yourself and your life if you understand it, and I'll try and convey that as best I can. Now, the opposite of being an end in yourself, or being ends in ourselves, is the idea of purpose. The notion of purpose is one of the most poisonous ideas that infests the human mind. In many ways, there are many ways people invent purpose. So, a lot of people think that the purpose of their life is to have their kids and create the next generation. Well, good luck to them on that. Other people think it's to accumulate money. Some people think it's to achieve some kind of wisdom or whatever. All these purposes are treating you as a means to an end, even the acquisition of wisdom. You are saying, well, I'm going to slog away at this thing for the next 10, 20 years with the aim of achieving something. So you become the means to achieve a particular end. It's poison. It's poison for a lot of reasons. One is it takes you away from the present. And it also makes you feel as though you're a slave to something. Now, as Spinoza says, we are a slave to God, but that's a different meaning. We're a slave to God or nature because we are born out of it and are one with it. But the kind of purpose I've been talking about are basically purposes that we dream up in our imagination. To be a good person, to be a nice person, to be a productive person, to be a happy person. Maybe your purpose is to be a happy person. There's a contradiction there. What we're not used to is the idea that we exist solely for ourselves. We don't exist to fulfill some purpose. And this is something Kant mentions, and Shunryu Suzuki said, we exist for ourselves. We don't exist for something else. And Spinoza says the same thing. They're dispelling the notion that we are, in some way, a means to some kind of end. Now, if you really get into this, then it implies a lot of things. One of the things it implies is that there are no external standards that are truly relevant to you. We have to live in society, so we pay lip service to the standards that people demand of us. We don't walk around naked, or we don't push over old ladies, which is probably not a good idea anyway. But we live by society's standards, not because we believe in them, but because we have to live among people. And as Spinoza says, we have to sacrifice a little of our natural sovereign right to live in a society that is reasonably stable. That's a whole podcast. So anyway, getting back to you are not a means to an end. If you are looking for external approval, it means you are trying to achieve something and treating yourself as a means. oh, I'm not good looking enough, or I'm not attractive enough. You're treating yourself as a means to achieve some kind of approval from the people who look at you. Or I'm not smart enough, or I need to do something to be more successful. Again, treating yourself as a means to an end. You are not created for something else. This is very hard to communicate, but what you are is the end point. There's nothing that you need to do or be or whatever to embellish that. You already are the end point. It doesn't matter what you're doing, even if you're thinking, oh, I need to do this or I need to do that. That is the end point. It's just that as an idea, as an understanding of yourself, it's fairly inadequate. But even so, if you're unhappy, that is the end point. That is the end, the manifestation in its own right, and it's fine. If you're unhappy, there's nothing wrong with being unhappy. However, if you can accept that you are not a means to an end, and you are an end in its own right, then at that point we go over to what Spinoza says about power, particularly in part 4 of the Ethics. You will be unhappy if your power, both of your mind and body, are in some way compromised. So, since you have a sovereign natural right, as Spinoza would call it, you can assert yourself to basically increase your power. Now, there's a whole rabbit hole there. I'm not particularly going to go down it, but as I've discussed on previous Spinoza podcasts, the greatest power is the power of your understanding. And we don't do that because we want to become something else. We just do it because that's our nature. That is our nature manifesting as the end. It's not a purpose or a means to something. And Spinoza says in Proposition 26, in Part 4, we don't acquire understanding or use reason for any secondary reason. We do it because that's our nature to do that. We're not doing it because we're trying to achieve something. So, Spinoza would say that what is good for you is what gives you more power, particularly power of understanding. And what is evil for you is what reduces your power. If you believe that you are a means to some end, you have placed that end above yourself and have said, I am inadequate, or something like that, as I am, and I need to become something else or achieve something else. And that something else becomes superior to you because you're chasing after it. So it's very similar to Proposition 33 in Part 1 of the Ethics, where Spinoza says, if God had to be good, he would be pursuing something, and he would have some kind of standard that was superior to him, it, her, whatever you want to say. So, even God is an end in its own right. Yet from our perspective, it may be wicked, cruel, evil, whatever you want to say. But the reality is that we have to look after our own interest, because as part of the whole of nature, we are endowed with a particular natural sovereign right to take whatever it is that we want to take and use it for our own purposes. And in fact, the 8th part of the appendix in part 4 summarizes this whole thing. Let me read it out. I'm sure I've read this out before, but it doesn't matter. It summarizes the whole way we should live our life in an instrumental kind of way. How to live a life where we have most power. So, and to live life as an end, as something manifesting, instead of something trying to achieve something. So, part 8 of the appendix in part 4. Whatsoever in nature we deem evil, that is capable of hindering us from being able to exist and enjoy a rational life, it is permissible for us to remove in whatever way seems safer. There's no compromise there. We're not trying to be nice people. Having said that, we don't want to necessarily upset people either. That's not useful for us. But if someone's stopping you doing something that you particularly want to do or whatever, or making demands of you, you can tell them in a very, very nice way to fuck off. But of course you say, oh, I'm busy with so-and-so, I hope you don't mind, and blah, blah, blah. Be a bit diplomatic about it, but as Spinoza says, to remove it in whatever way seems safer. On the other hand, whatever we deem good, that is advantageous for preserving our being and for enjoying a rational life, it is permissible for us to take for our use and to use it as we please. There you go. You're an end in your own right. There are no limiting factors on what you should acquire or use for your own purposes. The only limiting factor is your natural sovereign right, how smart or how strong or how whatever it is, whatever is the thing that gets you through life. Whatever you've got, you use for your own purposes. Everybody else is doing the same. They might not want to admit that, but they are. That's the nature of being an individual sentient thing on this planet. And finally he says, and as an absolute rule, it is permissible by the highest natural right for everyone to do what he judges to be to his own advantage. Now the religious people are not going to tell you that, and the moralists are not going to tell you that, but Spinoza's saying that. And to not live that way is to invite a life of unhappiness. So, let me recap that very quickly. You are not a means to an end. You are an end in your own right, and you have a natural sovereign right, as Spinoza would say. You exist for yourself. And your primary instinct, if you like, or conatus, is the conatus to understand and to reason, and you don't do it for any other reason than to understand. Proposition 26, part 4, the Ethics. And as far as it's possible, you manifest yourself as fully as you can, without offending people or looking like some kind of freak. And you take what is good for you, and you try to avoid, get rid of, destroy what is bad for you or evil for you. And above all, as Spinoza says, you do things for your own advantage. And there is absolutely nothing wrong in that. And someone I had a conversation with recently, he happened to be a Buddhist, said the only act of immorality is not to look after yourself. It's a very profound statement. I like that guy. So the only act of immorality, if you're thinking of morals and so on, is not to be what you are, because you are a thing, and you are not a means to some end to become some other kind of thing. You are what you are, and you manifest as you are. As far as possible, anyway.